Dari the California, Madigi, Chongqing, San Francisco, the Delia, I think Nibache, that's just a Digolia, and they answer the Dingadi Diconia, Puri Sore, and Dana Shingi, Purigi, Chongosure, and Sama, that one day, some Samarolia, again, Thomas, some dish shy.
Good evening. This is my second visit to the state of California and the city of San Francisco in particular. And it gives me great delight that during this particular visit, I am able to visit with my Tibetan friends who live in the San Francisco area, as well as all other members of the Tibetan community who have come here tonight. So at the beginning of our evening's gathering, I'd like to offer my heartfelt welcome to you and Tashi Dele.
And did you stand the Nimachi, Nimachi, Cusi, San Francisco, Leonce, Cusi, and the name of Los Angeles, Pachiminza, and there you have a 12 the Coco, Zawa in the Chunga Mare, and then I do Chusua Chilia, Cusi Chimbre, and just Chusua Lama Delia, your Mangushi those today, Lausoda, Pevase, and the Chumbre. 다 간다는 더리디에 미세기다 가르슈에 지당기 다 나라 지겐르아디 고급디 다 공부르세 그뒤에 지겐 로투가 말에 안 다다고도 저민일 사지 심브레 아메리카리아다 다 더리디 제빈 티 수버르 차리야레 안 제자다 지게 계급 망부질르아 고급 저기와 말에 다 이미냐 시계에 관례비냐 텔레비지 비밀소가냐 두제시아디 나랑 계시를 쓰디에 가르에서나 안다 시계소 안상으로지 가르 퓨리 근데 이미지고래 안다는 잡주기 다 잡주에서 말로 다 간다 아주 상으로지 거유당 카제제 내가 다 기도 지고 차대 예빈 주산에 아주 가수에다 사실 가발레비냐 근지 아주 투제시아다 아니 섬지 지야디 개심을지 나통디 인도산에 안들인데 아주 비밀소 투야 고급 총보대 시작 가부총 아들인디 고급디 규제 그냥 상으로리아 에너지 가수에 승구를 지야당 아 다나 신기 에네 비밀 예 비밀소리야 로봇 신경이 아니 지게게 조고 소리미냐 안들이 고급디 규제 그냥 저기 때 비밀소리야 잡존남들이야 잡존다로람 규제에 남들이야게 인타번 도치에당 그런 시슈야
In 2008, of course, I had a chance to visit the United States for the first time, and in the context of that visit, I only very quickly passed through San Francisco, basically just for the duration of one day, and then I immediately had to go down to Los Angeles. So I didn't have a chance, as I have tonight, to meet extensively with the Tibetan community. I only had a chance to visit one Dharma center, and of course many Tibetans came to that gathering, but I didn't have a chance to meet with as wide of a representation of the community as I have tonight. Nevertheless, during the time in 2008 that I didn't have a chance to broadly meet with the Tibetan community, the Lama at the Dharma Center I visited informed me that there were many disappointments that had not come to pass. And so I'm very happy today to have this opportunity to meet with you all. Of course, as you know, I don't get many opportunities to visit foreign countries. I've been to Germany once. This marks the third visit to the United States. And so this is something that doesn't happen often for me, but at the same time, I'm always very happy to meet with members of the Tibetan community wherever I go in the world, and I consider these opportunities to meet together with you to be very important to me. The reason is because we are all the same in being Tibetans. We are all refugees. We have all been separated from our homeland, and we all share the same sorrows and joys in connection with our experience as Tibetans. And so it's very important for me to meet with you, and I'm very happy to come together with you and have this exchange with you and offer my greetings. And I'd like to thank you for your own continuous concern about and support for the Tibetan people and the Tibetan community. And I would also like to express my thanks to the Western friends of Tibetan people who have continuously supported Tibetan people and the Tibetan cause. So to all of you who are gathered here tonight, I offer my true heartfelt thanks.
America Kyamguen 탐지 캠버 안에 양도 아메리카리아 폐도 제가 강조 지 가르에 양의 양도 에너지 현재하고 송토야 고거로 왕부사 용되어래 안 다는 신기 회기 아주 변의 최소하다 우지 라진 망부지 아메리카리아 더지 양습회도 안 다는 아주 비밀의 진주기 첩시 우지 사물배다 권한수인의 양의 양도 폐쇄 드링주산에 이게 아주 양세 지 최당 시 간지차는 미냐다 강수리아 그뒤에 지 데버럽치 원디가래 안 드링주산에 땅에 미세들이야 뭔가 슈가스게 처음에도 삼 정도 저지는 야버지 휴식입니다 자주 부르 시야로 받아 미망부지 냠도 점에 다 자주 부르 시야면은 괜찮아져 다이네 마시네 참점 변화 수수기 뭐셔버지 남이 비제도 냠도 점에 걸려야 이게 자주 부르 뭐중네 아니 봐 간테나 봐 시야잖아 그 매매서 차디가래 디소를 제제 아 상으로 비리비는 지구 인주산에 딱 계좌 잔주고 당 에너지 가서 비다고 개면중네 다 간테는 좀 시야잖아 바진 지그레 상상을 정도 인주산에 땅에 숨주 가시지需要给别人说
Well, I don't have anything special to say that I came prepared to share with you. And moreover, it's a little bit uncomfortable up here on stage with the lights shining on me like I'm a rock star or something like that. But it does occur to me that the Tibetan community in the United States in particular is very fortunate because His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the great omniscient Lord, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, visits the United States, as you know, rather frequently, and it's incredibly fortunate that you have the opportunity to again and again witness him and hear his voice in person. This is supremely wonderful. And in the same way, we have the great masters of the various traditions of Tibetan Buddhism who also frequently visit the United States. And not only that, but our wonderful Tibetan political leaders and community leaders also live in some cases and in other cases frequently visit the United States. So that we can maintain constant connection with our leaders in this way is really wonderful. And since you have such constant contact with them, therefore I feel that you are well-informed people and they have shared many insights and good advice with you. I don't have any particular special advice to add on top of that. Nor do I have anything special prepared to present to you. However, I don't think this is a big problem because we're all Tibetans and therefore we are like one big family. And one doesn't need to make a special preparations of what kind of speech to give when you meet your own family members. So I feel that since we're all family together, therefore it would be suitable for me to share some spontaneous thoughts and ideas with you. And that's what I'd like to do this evening.
다 아메리게 나올래 배봐 망부지 다 수시 여러분들 수시 배봐 마셔를 받지 배봐 마셔 자가기 제리아 배봐 마셔 수시를 살던 고뉴 당에 대 심주 자체야마다 다 드네 디젤 아메리카 맨로 제 아메리카야 저니에 다 가수에 아메리카야 가수에지 다 시차버서 말에 이제 다 배바 먹고요 아래 단도이네 아메리칸 드란 베지치니 배바 먹고요 아래 그 뒤에는 예살이야 tinsamdes 용으로도 tinsam데 여러르샤 마도 엄마 아메리카리아 진드란 베지치기 제자데 로투레다 말에 시케제니 망고지 요니다 뭐 자라치니 망고 요니 아니 제가 다 간다 아메리카를 좋아 배주시니 배워 먹고 줘래 다 간다 배워 먹지 아메리카를 내네 지내 지리야 냠도 초대체 대할 때 윤유를 찾아 다 가서 인살이야 내 지라 냠도 다 가서 인살 토르네서 말이 유압이 인두산에 다 디기 얘 당기 쉬는 신기 엔 겨울미치 데 페베컵레 다는 신기 회기 지 최저 우지의 최시 우지의 페베컵이야 엔 상원은 냠도 순점네 냠도 투제시하고 연구하래 다디 계심 시작에 섬팅이 가르스나 삼서 토르드 뒤산에 엔 아주지 야 삼삼 지 집에기 아주 비미지 내단로디 다 제베서지 다 소소소소기 소화기야도마도 다 집에 내다는 제베서 참고 다 참점 냠도 순서마로 중 다나 신기 깔로로 냐도 중 이 제베 걸에 아니 아주 텐수를 장제 상 아주 집에 내다는 근데 저희와 당 다나 신기 지 양 비미서 편수지기 질이야 심구르 제아당 지기 질이야 안다 간다 다 초보사스는 딘디시하게 고급으로지 더구아래 다디 게시부 시작해서 정기에 리주산의 이제 고급 예부터 야부 시작해 제가 이제 고급의 배주 당시 아주 상월로 비밀 상월로 하나 뒤단 뒤수 편수 찍지려다 간다지 제가 탐습 제거하지만 튠지 탐습 제거하디 개점 시달에서 정리에 튠지당 튠지기 뉴바당 편준 전지기 뉴바든 제발차 뉴바디 뉴바 치슈지 지도가 나 뉴바 치슈를 차디야래 제가 디 거두이미네 뉴버디 나주다 냠도 요과야 지당 마냐버지 제과데 개침시라래 something.
In terms of the Tibetan diaspora, of course, as we all know, India is the country that is host to the greatest number of refugee Tibetans. And then after India, I haven't done any thorough research about this, so please don't quote me, but my current rough understanding is that Switzerland is second country in terms of hosting the largest number of Tibetans, and then after Switzerland comes the United States of America. There are many Tibetans who live in the United States of America, and there are also many Tibetans who are trying to come to the United States of America. These days, maybe that's gone down a little bit, and maybe a little bit more Tibetans are attempting to travel to Europe and perhaps settle in Europe. But I remember times when many Tibetans were coming to me and requesting divinations to help them determine whether or not they would get accepted to settle in the United States.
They get a visa, I think.
Yes, and all the legal requirements and so forth. So many Tibetans, of course, live here already, and many Tibetans are aspiring to live here. And it is wonderful that we can gather as Tibetans in the United States, and it's particularly wonderful when special occasions arise, such as visits by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. By His Holiness the Dalai Lama, because what happens sometimes is that we get scattered. The Tibetan community gets scattered and doesn't necessarily assemble in one place together. So these visits by great masters and community leaders and so on, and of course foremost among all the leaders of the Tibetan people is His Holiness the Dalai Lama, these occasions can be very helpful and powerful in bringing us Tibetan people together in one place so that we can share our connections with each other, share our friendliness with each other. This is very important because when we get scattered, then what happens is that we tend to slightly forget about our collective situation and our collective condition. And we focus a little bit more exclusively on our own individual lives, separate from what's going on with everyone else. So these gatherings are an important reminder of what our collective situation is like, how we're doing as a people in general, and it's a chance for us to remind ourselves and refresh our concern for each other as well as our support for each other, friendliness towards each other, and familiarity towards each other. So I think it's very important for us to seize these opportunities to be together in this way when we come together in these large assemblies. I think it's important for us to use these opportunities to try to have a sense of continuous harmony, cooperation, and friendliness with each other. If we have harmony and cooperation, then that's actually the most powerful force in any society to bring about positive change. And so I think it's very important for us to make sure that this spirit of harmony and cooperation does not deteriorate.
That is America Shisha and Taba yang kashin second generation so many mirab niba that did charge any yebre three just that America lia ke America lia salon chumbege that pebegi that puju so dan nation solia any pegi that 가지고 다 최당 리숑당 안다지 배배기 가지고 다 현행 공司 진짜이다 로정다 파산자사디 다디스 갖고 차리 다디 아주 강해르지 테리요래 예 치게리아 차롱 충배기 아니 베베기 다 그래 베베기 다 뷰죽인데 다람살아 참참 다 summer camp winter summer camp 말을 다 간다 찍지 summer camp인데 winter camp이다 summer camp도 이제 영어세 되게 벽에 장네 디시빌리아 벽에 장네 이제 지금 이제 그룹인데 사가시 통용이 고조 투디산 참상 베즈 세번 중에를 주도 세번디스 경계를 치 고조 마시 벽에 아우샤 신민도 아니 파때 되네 지게 베베기 섭단을 선말로 다지 베베기 넘버로 시다 매드스 아니 베게에 대해 마시지 다 베게 마시네 이내가 베베네 땅 베르지 베베기 richness of culture somewhere 지 region 표준 서부야 땅 아니 최기 땅 아니 간다 다나신 geographical somewhere 지 사지기 베기 윤컴 니즈르 디게 포지션 신기 매매수시 제가 디디즈 텔레장 지 로팜바르지 다 벽에 마시나다 디제나 understandable somewhere 다 디다 되게 도스 다다 다 임베 베베 내다는데 다들 베베기 지 가르쳐야 루규 아 다나신기 데지 베베 니즈르디 마신 디 껴버리시면 되죠 아 내일 주사 디규전 때네 땅 아주에게 랭게 치슈르디 알았잖아 아주에게 딱 살롱 중심바다 마오발라 살롱 중월 기회기 비주티저 소소기 벽이 끼 파매기 끼다 아니 리숑 되게 될이야 아주 가수에 진짜 딱 간다 나로래 야구치 때 돼야지 진짜지 아주에게 딱 간다는 개쿠가디 개좀 쉽지 차디도 삼든데 정기에 다디 마시 캬주 집이 랭게 말에 아주 삼회 랭게에 찌기찔이야 삼회기 로봇 제거야지데 마도 다디 캬 집이 랭게 마다 이미냐 아주 삼회 냠도 다디 차수부지다 야부지 제거하디 개좀 쉽지 차디도 삼정데 네, 알았어. Not you. Okay. 마시 다 뒤주의検査사람들다. 뒤주의 가져야 나 이제 라니에 총망다. 마시 장 아메리카 뒤주의 치 뒤주의 참가 디디 장 갈래 가도 당연히 양아 뒤주의 치야잖아. 아 뒤주의 샤 가져 나나르지. 다 이내 다 강.
So within this situation that we're in now, where we have many Tibetans in these various countries in the world, we also have second generations of Tibetans who are growing up in those foreign countries. So in the United States, we have Tibetan people, members of Tibetan families who are born in the United States or who have mostly grown up in the United States, and there will likely be many more Tibetan people who are born in the US and grow up in the US. So how we focus on those Tibetan children and youth is a very important issue. Obviously, we have our own very precious spiritual traditions, culture, education, and so on, and it's a great challenge for us to think about how we can preserve this in the experience and habits and identity of our youth and our children. So what happens sometimes is that Tibetan people who live in foreign countries come to Dharamsala for these events that are comparable to a summer camp, for these brief visits where they get together at TCV, the Tibetan Children's Village Schools, and do things like learn a little bit of Tibetan and learn a little bit of Tibetan language, enjoy some aspects of Tibetan culture and so on. And I have met members of these groups several times. And some of these experiences have made me a little bit sad, not because their Tibetan language was not up to a certain level. I think that if the Tibetan youth born in foreign countries, if their Tibetan is not so great, that's somewhat understandable. But what really kind of affected me was the fact that when I saw them, there was something about their demeanor or their presence that didn't feel strongly Tibetan to me. There seemed to be a real disconnect or a distance between their presence or their demeanor and all of the things that we identify as Tibetan. And that includes the knowledge, you know, like having basic knowledge about the cultural richness of Tibet, having basic knowledge about the geographical location and situation of the environment of Tibet. And when I saw that these qualities or these forms of knowledge and familiarity weren't present in these children, it was a little bit sad for me. So I think that trying to preserve an appreciation of what it is to be Tibetan, as well as some familiarity with certain aspects of Tibetan culture in the children, is a very important responsibility that we all share. It's an important responsibility in relation to the children that we have now and the Tibetan youth that are present with us now, and it's also important in relation to the future children who will come along. For us to try to expose them and educate them about the language and culture of Tibet is very important. And it's not just, I'm not saying this is just your responsibility alone. We all share this responsibility together. And so I think it's very important for us to think together about ways that we can really take this seriously and be effective in our goal to share the Tibetan culture, language, and so forth with our Tibetan children.
And second generation, even third generation, traditional emphasize some of the digital nature of this yamare. That Kuzu Talon Yosepena, Labdon Rosa de, and Sigia Labdon Rodiare, and Kuzu Talon, Takara, Kuyutan. Dana Singi, and a Kuzuigita, Rishun de Mandaji, and Salon on the Yavi Industan, and Azugi, Quebec, Cheddar, Rishun, Kuzula, Pachaja, Lobson Dea, the Imina, the Digi Kuyutan. The Digi culture, how to fit some of it. Dinalo Kandiji Tumbachi. Then go me about Senator Tumbachi, Kazuji, Kuzula, Pachajo, Wasadi, not some don't watch Rendo Singo. Semana Samson, Singazu, Luxu, the Chatan of the old ways of Luxu, Nimbodaji, Sugungi, Tadan, Digiton, Chevin, and Kuzulia. This young Kanye Koran Salon, you say Kuyu, Rishun Data, Matsu Kuzulia, Tea, Be Kasuata, Zing Tevjet, Ningawa Channel, and take Kuzu Kanye of Tigar. The day my imbatone. And then I'll Samolo, the day the Sigeli, that Church Dharma Center, some of it, that Kalakan Lord, that some Kashi, Dharma Center Kashi, like this. Nubar, Pena, Nubar, that's Penjo, Nubar Summer, the day Kasha, Nubar is Yedem, the order. And Dana Singi, Yaji, Tagana Sing the community Shindata, Mi Gertan, community, Samuel Ruchi, De Tolia, Yagachawati, Cash of Shanto, some around when there is Chengado, they.
So not only do we have second-generation Tibetan children, but sometimes third-generation Tibetan children growing up in the United States. And our project is to figure out ways to make Tibetan culture relevant for them in a way in which it doesn't force them to struggle against the culture that they're living in. So what I'm not saying is that we should try to get our children to cease and hold to Tibetan culture to the detriment of their learning about the culture that surrounds them. That wouldn't be skillful. We need to figure out how to we need to figure out how to get the Tibetan culture to be a harmonious fit with the culture that surrounds them, so that what we are giving our children in terms of Tibetan culture, on the one hand, is not in conflict or in constantly struggling against the culture that surrounds them. So we should try to make these two things harmonious with each other, and we can further reflect on ways to do that, because sometimes what happens is that the Tibetan traditions and cultural habits and so forth that we try to teach our children are seen as just an old way of doing things, an old tradition, whereas our children are surrounded by the culture that they live in, which is filled with new ways of doing things. So sometimes there appears to be a struggle. So one of our biggest challenges is to figure out how to take away that sense of struggle and teach them Tibetan culture in a way that harmonizes with the culture that surrounds them in a more general way. So I think that one key avenue might be some connection with the Dharma centers. Of course, there are many different Dharma centers in the US, and some of these Dharma centers are quite influential in terms of their resources and so on. So there can be perhaps some more interface with the Dharma centers, as well as activity amongst various Tibetan community groups. And mainly we should try to figure out ways to get together to move these ideas forward.
Any final point is that final point is lana. That the Tadun Jit Karesana. Dang out some Jida that in South Australia, Viveci on Nalolia, Narda Mirror, Nargita Karangashe, Mirror Gamas of the mirror, the Mirror Savian Nalolia, Yaji Tawa Mijikba, Sumsu Mijikba, Yaji Ya Kaswe, Tata Nimbadam Mirror, Tata Saber, the Midata Mangu on the Yare. And the angels on it, today, Tony and Azushi Kaswe, Pinsu, Chikichilia, Kasweta, except some of it, Pinsu Chikichilia, Tatilia, Kaswe, Tane Chetu Chikita, Genda Miavichikwa, the Kachum Shucha, the Yare, Tagan the Tochi and Azu G. Uti Seman, Tangazu Pimichilia, the Uti, that General Consistent which show those. Uti Yava Imre, then this is Uti, Tanga to Pevachibu Member. That is Zumbulingia. She Sambu Shuki, Shibute to me, that this is Uti, not to Yore. That the Uti, Sindalia, the Kala House Chadi Yore. As soon as I see Jarjuki, Mangu are the Uti, the Yava the Kala House Share. Just this is G. Uti, Yava Digi. That pains and that in town of the Naja Hago Chess. The Lizzie Uti is marrying, and other some of the other some of 20 and a half of Shire. Some of Tana as Pevena Lolia Tadadi Uti Digi Karsobe, Sunwegi, Kundo Digba, Sangolo, Sungilche de Armado. That in case it tears marrying. 공부지 교육 유발을 때문에 당아서 추가 민다도 추루 민다 여러분 뭐 여러 봐 아주 여러분 뭐 연구로 봐 근데 다다 진짜 매비치지 다 녀로 테스트에서 여러 녀로 테스트에서 매비치 연구 말아 봐아 상월로 상계에서는 다 니즈 카드 말이지 여러 매비치한테 깔아가고시래 다 이미네 시제찬 알아 상월로 지교육 유발을 시야버디 아주 지규를 우치지야 그랬잖아. 대신 좀되지. 인도산디 지규를 우치디 인다심 거지 이마당 자심 거지 이마디 삼상 아주 신만. 다다 예외걸 마신시 선이지 매외걸이야. 답에 산도 사람이 다 가르쳐해. 신뢰하고 알았어. 다 뒤치자. 제가 뒤균세 때네. 아주 이제 이거 지교 우체 제외 인도산에 뒤균세때 뒤기 지교 우체지 와래야. 아주 상물로 지 공부 찍고 결도입니다. 아주 비밀지다 게 상물로야. 편도 첨부시다. 아주 텔레 지 가르쳐해. 내가부터 더둘래야. 텔레 편도시야 영 말았으면 또 정의에. 지당 아주 지심주 미지바 다음 미지고 용시래. 다 임비네야. 섬주 미지보다 다음 미지보 뒤기 현배왕게. 양지 소수 진제기다. 삼성 양 뒤기 랑가신다를 내비나. 아주 지대게 상물로야 종교태야를. 아주 상물로. 다 뒤 참에 도시하러나 샤인. 아주 제자. That is final point
So the final point that I would like to make is that these days, and as it has been for some time, we Tibetan people have enjoyed the tremendous good fortune of having a leader who unites all of us. His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Of course, one attribute that differentiates the modern Tibetan people from the way Tibetans used to be is that these days, even in Tibetan society, there is a little bit more diversity of opinion and diversity of views on how things should be done and so forth. And that's fine. We should be willing to accept the fact that people are going to have different opinions and different views, because we are particularly fortunate that we have this unifying leader in His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And it is very important for us to appreciate that. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is not only a great leader for Tibetan people, but he is one of the most positive influences in the world in terms of leadership for the improvement of the world and for building a better future for the world. So we should really appreciate that that type of a leader, one of the greatest leaders there is in the world, is our His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We should recognize how precious that is. We should remember that it would be extremely rare and difficult for any group of people to have a leader like His Holiness. And he is a unifying leader that unites all Tibetan people. If there were not such a unifying force like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I think it would be very difficult for us Tibetans to enjoy the harmony that we have enjoyed up until now. With the unifying leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he is like the sun in the center, and he is protected by the circle that is the Tibetan people. And without that kind of unifying leadership, of course, as we know, within Tibetan society, there are many different ways of doing things, many different spiritual traditions and so forth. I think that many more problems would arise. Of course, we do have some problems these days, here and now. It's impossible for there to be no problems. I think it's only Buddhas who have no problems. So if we were all became enlightened, maybe we wouldn't have any problems. So we do have some problems here and there, but just think of how many problems we would have without the unifying leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which brings us all together in a harmonious way. That's a really precious situation to be in, and it's very important for us to recognize that it's precious. What happens sometimes is that we forget how precious this leadership is, we forget how precious this unity and harmony are, and we don't want to fall into that habit of forgetting. We don't want to be in the situation where this unifying leadership is gone, and then only then do we recognize how precious it was. Because if we wait until then, it'll be too late to take advantage of the benefits that this leadership is giving us. So I think it's important for us to continue walking forward as Tibetan people under the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and with great appreciation for all of the benefits that this leadership brings us. If we do this, then this will be beneficial to all Tibetans in general, and it will be beneficial to all individual Tibetans as well. And I think that there's no greater way to go than that in the short term and in the long term for the Tibetan people. And if we proceed in that way, it's no problem at all that there will be diversity of opinions, diversity of thought, diversity of views among us. We can still bring that diversity on the path and use it for the benefit of others. But if we don't recognize His Holiness's precious leadership and allow that to unify us and hold us together, then I think we're not looking good in terms of where we're heading in our future. So therefore, it's very important to appreciate this and move forward together in unity. So that's all I had to say. That is my final point, and I would just like to conclude by saying thank you very much.
Not yet, thank you very much.
It was my penultimate final point.
That and then you start and Mahobalia Yanayam Jetua you and Anna Singi Tangarang in Bilia Hashua Daji Pele David Goli Minia Takashue Pele David Goli now, Jawaram Chigi Shabdo Drumadu Nina Shamdem Jabra. Chuna number of those tens, where they become the tens. They have read that in it, and it's Yard Suyong. A Yard Suyong, the Carrier Mongusta Shumre, the imminent Tandun, she that Susu Gergi Gange di, but Sudu Shache, and it's Pujibegi that they do the catcher which is done. The chair which is. So some of those times they are, and the Hindustani and council 30 months of Pavaja, Porchumi in Dusan, and council in Bina, Maram Wene, and that 30 Kiwan Dilia, which led a melon Kiwangi, and the pay Mirig, the Kashway, Risukia, Porchumi in Dusan, and so Miss Dina Lolia, and Katu Jigi, Peggy, Mirigi, and the Jigi. Didu shadow, a Shabdoro, how to do show some of those 10 years, and the Industane, and Council Law, and a Tana Shingi, Hashuradaji, Sem Boba Mashumber Cheche, and Samen Wene, Taji, Susu Gergi, Mizin Dulam Dimbina, Ketchum Shimchadi Yare, and Tigi, Masu Pevicina Diola, Tegan Jabal Chadi Yare. And Dana Susu Mizin Dulam di Yabuchumbo to Masibi and Pejibe Tendala Yiminia, it counts some single lenche, and Susu Nuba Kayo Tone, and Beji, Cherona Shuai, the Nansame Yamdo Dozichi Tone. Legan Yamdo Sherry Mina, Dende, and Azulia Azulia Seven and Shingi. Today, Sambotora Chigdan, and Shiji Yamzumgi, and a Gava Sambuji, Yontu de Sambeta, Chikoba, Narayan, Chibushayo, and then you Samalia, Tosena Shane. Really. No more. Get the city. Ji lan jaba ya. Get mangbola den ji tu ra. This is for you.
So in conclusion, I'd like to just say again how happy it makes me to come together and be with all of you. And I certainly have the hope and aspiration to come together and be with you again and again in the future. And in the same way, I'd like to say that even back when I was living in Tibet, I would always reflect to myself that I had a wish to serve His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to help fulfill the intentions of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And after I left Tibet and came to India, of course I've been through many difficult times, but I've always maintained the attitude that it is important to set those personal difficulties aside and continue working for the general good of the Tibetan people, because the general good of the Tibetan people is more important than any one individual's hardships. So that's always the attitude that I've tried to return to. And due to my own karmic fortune and aspirations, I have been able to take birth as a Tibetan person in this lifetime. And because of that, I continually commit myself to accomplishing the good of the Tibetan people and to do as much as I can to serve the Tibetan people in this lifetime. I always think in this way. So I would like to, in the same way, ask all of you to maintain your confidence in serving the good of the Tibetan people as well as the good of yourselves individually. Making your own life a good life, even individually, has a positive effect on the Tibetan people as a whole. So if we can work together on ourselves and on ourselves individually and on ourselves collectively, then that is the best way to go, for us to apply as much joyful effort as we can. And if we continue in this way, I truly have confidence that there will come a day when those who have left and those who are at home will be able to come together in happiness. Thank you very much.